I want to talk about pelvic floor breathing for men today. A lot of us in this society are taught to belly breathe, and that kind of comes from if you're a mouth breather. Typically when we breathe through our mouth, we are breathing into the chest. If you take a breath through the mouth and you feel the chest rise and the ribs spread. And when people are going through panic attacks or maybe in a yoga class trying to get the breath past the chest and more into the body, we may have you breathe into the belly, because the belly is the softest part of the body. There are no bones that the muscles can constrict around and help reinforce containment. And so it's a place that can fill up easily with breath. Our belly is soft and flexible, it's pliable. But we want to be able to be pliable in the rest of the body too. And if you notice, if I take an inhale and my belly comes outward, it actually pulls my ribs down and creates less space in my rib cage as I breathe in. And then exhale, belly comes in, right? And also when I belly breathe, it's lifting up on my pelvic floor and reinforcing that idea of the pelvic floor pulling up as I inhale. And when we breathe into the body, we want to create the largest container for breath that we can. And if we're lifting up on our pelvic floor as we belly breathe, because as we breathe, our pelvic floor is a secondary diagram, a second diagram, not really secondary. But our diaphragm, as we inhale, goes down, pushes against our organs. If we belly breathe, then the organs move into the belly and the pelvic floor lifts up and everything kind of comes to center here. And the reason we don't want this to happen is because as we inhale and our organs go down, we actually want them to compress into the pelvic floor and stretch the pelvic floor, help give it tone and suppleness. So if our organs are going into the belly and our pelvic floor is lifting, then we exhale and it just kind of relaxes back down. There's really not much movement going on in our pelvic floor. And it's not creating the large container that we need if we're only breathing here to here or from here to here. So we want that container to extend down into the pelvic floor as we inhale. And when we become chest breathers or belly breathers, it can really cause restriction in the chest. It can cause tension in our chest, and that makes it harder to breathe. And when it makes it harder to breathe, we can become more anxious, more reactive. We also hold most of our emotions in our hips, and we're not breathing into the hips and massaging those pathways for our nerves and our neural connections. We're really getting closed off to our emotions here. So one of the reasons men are considered visual creatures, I think this stems from puberty, when men start to feel sexual sensation, and they also have an erection that goes along with that, and it becomes a visual thing. They attach the sensation to what they're seeing their body doing. With women, we don't really have that, so we have to learn to sense. That's why we're considered more sensitive or more sensual. It's all about senses. But women are also visual. It's why we wear makeup and dress up and do our hair and things like that. So women got both of those, but men aren't taught the sensual and tend to be exploited on the visual. And so they're not encouraged to fuse those together and become their own empowered being. So to give you a visual on how pelvic floor will help us tune into our senses again. So since we can't really see the pelvic bowl, we can see how maybe the rest of the body is moving and how that might affect it. But to give you a visual on what is going on down there as we breathe, I've decided to take a bowl of rice. And each grain of rice you can think of as like a morsel of sensation, a unit of cells being awakened by oxygen. And when the cells come alive, then that reconnects our body to our brain and can create sensation in our body. So we want to give as much oxygen to our body as possible. And when we're closing these spaces off and maybe not breathing into them, they can become muddled. The pathways will start to close up and just become dormant in that area. It may be harder to access sensation, but we can restore those pathways and restore that connection with our breath. And imagine my hands are the pelvic pelvic floor. So within our pelvic bowl, we have this network of muscles that line the pelvic bowl. That's our pelvic floor. We have the holes for like our anus or our urethra. And we can use our pelvic floor muscles to contract and expand. And if you have a really tight pelvic bowl and you're always doing like Kegels and stuff, it's just going to cause more dysfunction, maybe pain, can lead to incontinence later in life, this tightening. So imagining my fingers are the pelvic bowl, and as I inhale, it pulls up. And then exhale, it just kind of relaxes back down. And I inhale and pull up and relaxes back down. And if I'm trying to get morsels of sensation, I'm not really pulling anything in here as I inhale, and I'm not really getting anything as I exhale. If I inhale and spread into the pelvic bowl, right, then it can awaken those cells, stretch that tissue, and bring more oxygen into the body. And as you inhale, deflate the body by lifting the pelvic bowl. You got all these morsels of sensation spreading through the body on the breath. Then inhale, gathering more. Exhale, dispensing. So they're going to give you an idea of the difference of breathing and lifting the pelvic bowl, and how important it is to breathe and expand instead. And as we're expanding, the organs are moving down into the pelvic bowl, massaging those muscles, also massaging the organs, compressing the organs, and then when they come back up, they refill with oxygen and blood. Really creates a more healthy environment for our system altogether, rather than just letting them move back and forth as we belly breathe. You can even see my chest lifting, going down and compressing my lungs as I breathe into my belly. So let's take a look at what the difference of pelvic floor breathing and belly breathing look like in the body. I'm going to do a belly breath here as I inhale. Oh, it's hard to do. So I inhale, my belly comes forward, my pelvic floor lifts up, and my ribs kind of pull in as my belly stretches forward. Exhale, belly to spine. And if I pelvic floor breathe, my belly is not going to come outward. It's actually going to lengthen and extend. And it's more of an hourglass shape or barbell. You think of breathing 160 degrees into the chest and also into the hips. So my midsection is going to lengthen to kind of suction that breath from the chest into the hips like a straw. You see here, my chest spreads and my belly, instead of going outward, actually comes in and up. Creates that suctioning between the top and the bottom. And the top and the bottom I'm talking about is the spine. So the top of the spine, where all of our nerves connect to the brain, we're breathing into the chest here, into the shoulders. And then down here, we're breathing into the sacrum, the bottom of the spine. We want to expand that and massage all of those nerves in that area rather than inhaling and squeezing in on them and tightening them even more and really causing friction in our connection and strain. So now that you have an idea of what it kind of looks like in the body, let's get into feeling it within our body. So something simple you can do to feel into your own pelvic bowl, just kind of give some proprioception to sensation, what that feels like to spread the pelvic bowl if that's something you're not used to doing. If you have a rag at home or a small towel, you just want to roll it up. We're just trying to bring the floor up to our pelvic floor. So whatever we're sitting on, if you can sit on the floor, that's great. Sometimes I have people sit on a stool or a chair, as long as the surface is pretty firm. You don't want to sit on a really soft couch or cushiony seat. So wherever you're sitting, you'll take this roll, and if this isn't big enough, you have a larger towel. You can use anything. I'm sure you all have a hand towel somewhere at home, or even a t-shirt, socks, or something that you can bundle up. It's going to go in between the anus and the testicles of the perineum. So you see it sitting here underneath me. If you're sitting on a chair, you don't have to have the legs crossed. They can be straight out here. And they don't have to be crossed here if that's not comfortable. And so I'm just gonna sit here. If it's not large enough, roll it up a little bit more, double it up. Take 2 rags together, roll those up, make it thicker. Whatever works. Be mindful of your scrotum. And then just finding your seat, maybe wiggle a little side to side. Find your sit bones in the ground. And then inhale, and I want you to imagine a balloon within your hips, and you're inflating the balloon. And you want the edge of that balloon to bump into that bulge. So feel the balloon spread through the hips, open up. Then exhale, use the muscles of your pelvic floor to deflate that balloon, lifting up. Inhale and spreading. See if you can detect the bulge, feel the muscles pressing against the rag. Exhale and lift. Now this time, as the pelvic floor is opening and spreading, I want you to imagine it like a hand spreading over the rag as you inhale, widening the fingers of the pelvic floor. Then exhale, trying to pick that rag up and lift it. Not actually going to do that, but just visualizing using the muscles as if you were. And inhale, spreading the hand again over the rag. Exhale, and lifting it up. Squeezing all the air out of the body, soften the belly. Inhale, spread. Exhale, lift. This gives you an idea what the breath should feel like in the body. Inhale and spreading. Exhale and lifting. Wrapping those fingers around the rag. Inhale, open. And exhale, lift. Just a simple way of using support to help us rediscover that relationship with the different part of our body. So now that we have an idea of where the pelvic floor is in the body, what it feels like to breathe into the pelvic floor and exhale and lift the pelvic floor. So when I say lift up on the pelvic floor, it'd be the same idea as if I said lift your balls. Use the same muscles to lift your balls. So that's lifting the pelvic floor. You may feel your balls move up and down. It may take some time. It took me about 6 months to where I was checking in with myself and found that I was breathing correctly. And the golden rule of that is that the diaphragms move in the same direction. So as I inhale, my diaphragm below my ribs moves down. My pelvic floor should be moving down also, not coming together in opposite directions. So how do I tap in and remind myself pelvic floor breathing very easily? Because you want to be able to, during the day, check your breath and then have a way to remind you of what it feels like, right? So we're going to learn our goddess squat here. This is an exaggeration of what I'm going to tell you to do, but this gives you an idea, and then we're going to move it into a smaller movement that's less obvious and a little more subtle. So take our hands down to the side, and typically in a yoga class, you would inhale as you rise, inhale and rise on the breath, right? And then exhale, go down, contract everything. This is counterintuitive for the pelvic floor breathing. This is while our legs are moving out, we're creating space in the pelvic floor. Let's bring the breath into it. So inhaling into the pelvic floor, inflating that balloon in the hips. You can bring the arms along to remind you which way everything's moving. Then exhale, you're zipping up through the midline as you lift the pelvic floor. Actually brings more structure to the core and helps us create a solid stance. So inhale, release and relax the pelvic floor that spreads open on the breath. Exhale, gather and lift, deflating that balloon as the air pushes you up. Inhale and open. Exhale, take off, zipping up the center. Inhale, fill the container of the body, head to tail. Exhale, lifting. So that's the bigger pose of it. This is something you can do at home in your exercise practice just to help reiterate the breath and reverse incorrect breathing. If you're in the grocery store or just out and about and you don't want to do this in public, I just kind of stand still and remember, I kind of bend my knees, plie, inhale as I fill up and I become heavy with breath. Exhale, floating up as the breath leaves my body. Inhale, opening. Exhale. So I just kind of sit and and do this just to remind myself, okay, this is what it feels like, and then I can continue doing it without motion. Release outward motion. This reminder of how the body's moving and the legs spreading and opening. Pelvic floor is also opening and going along for the ride, zipping up and lifting to rise. This is another easy but effective exercise to help you recondition the body into pelvic floor breathing. I'll demonstrate here and then you can join in. Just watch it first to see how my body's moving. So I'm gonna lay on the ground, feet on the floor, knees bent. As I inhale, I'm gonna flood the hips with my breath, so much that they rock forward. You see my back arches here? So my tailbone is pushing into the ground, lengthening the belly, breathing into my chest. I'm gonna exhale, relax the tailbone, let it tip back down. And the back relaxes on the floor. And I inhale. Tailbone tilts forward as the breath enters. My pelvic floor is spreading open to allow the breath to move this way. Exhale and relax down. Go ahead and give this a try. Put your hands maybe on your pelvic bones here, and as you inhale, try to push your fingers towards your toes as your pelvic floor tilts forward and the back arches off of the ground. Exhale and release. Just doing this back and forth, breathing into the pelvic floor and into the nerves of the sacrum as it massages on the back, on the floor here. Inhaling forward, exhaling, relaxing down. It's giving you an idea of this pelvic motion, giving a little bit more range and stretch. And exhale. So now we're going to incorporate more pelvic thrusting with the pelvic floor breathing. It's a great exaggerated movement to help restore full body breathing. So watch me demo a couple of times and then you can join in. I'm going to inhale, pelvis rocks forward, back arches, belly lengthens, chest fills up. Exhale, tailbone relaxes, push into the floor with the feet, tailbone rolls towards the ceiling. And then I inhale into the chest and unroll my spine down. Tailbone will be the last thing towards the floor, then hips rock forward is all an inhale. Exhale, dropping the tailbone, continue to curl, kind of rolling it up like a tube of toothpaste as the breath moves out of the body. Breath starts to move into the chest, rolls down the spine, into the hips, fills up the hips and rolls forward. Exhale, curling the tailbone, rising, breath moves out. Go ahead, inhale, roll that spine down, join me. So we inhale, hips rock forward. Exhale, relax the tailbone, begin to curl it up towards the ceiling, releasing the breath out of the chest. Inhale into the chest, down into the hips. They fill up and rock forward. Exhale, tilting up. Lifting that pelvic floor as we lift up. Inhale, releasing, opening, spreading the pelvic floor as it fills with breath. Exhale, lifting, gathering, breath leaves the body. This exercise here also helps you get more range of motion within the hips, within the thrusting, and at that sacrum, at the base of the sacrum where all the nerves are gathered. It's just going to wake up and massage that area, help you extend and expand your capacity for sensation. It's important to remember that our sexual organs are made of muscle and tissue, are connected to the other muscle and tissue networks of our entire body. So learning to create supple muscle instead of strained and constricted muscle helps us spread sensation through the body. The state of our pelvic floor is going to determine and dictate the levels and magnitude of sensation that we can receive, not only during sex, but also pleasure within every aspect of life. I hope you found the exercises helpful and you continue to practice them and continue checking your breath to see if you're breathing backwards and using these simple exercises to reset yourself. Change takes time, but I think if you stick with it, you'll find yourself coming into more fulfillment, satisfaction, and even clarity. Thank you for taking the time to watch. See you next time.